Every photograph from the Apollo 17 mission has been digitally altered. I know this because my father was one of the men who did the alterations, working in a classified NASA facility that officially doesn't exist, spending 30 years erasing evidence of what the astronauts really found. He kept copies of the originals. After he died, I found them hidden in a fireproof safe behind a false wall in his basement. 2,847 photographs showing the moon's surface as it truly appears. The craters aren't empty. They never were. Every photograph shows the same thing. Buildings. Cities of black stone rising from the lunar dust, arranged in patterns that made my eyes water if I stared too long, casting shadows that don't match the sun's position. And standing in doorways, watching from windows, gathered in formations that looked almost military. Figures, thousands of them. Watching the astronauts, watching the camera, watching Earth rise over the horizon with expressions that my father described in his journal as hungry anticipation. The astronauts were never supposed to land at Taurus Littrow. That site was chosen specifically to avoid the population centers visible in earlier reconnaissance photos. But something went wrong. A navigation error, or perhaps not an error at all, brought them down at the edge of a city that stretched for miles beneath the crater shadows. They couldn't ignore it. They couldn't pretend it wasn't there. So they did what explorers do. They investigated. They photographed. They even entered one of the buildings and found something inside that made one astronaut drop to his knees and weep. He has never spoken about what he saw. None of them have. But my father's notes describe the object recovered from that building, a sphere of unknown material, covered in symbols that NASA's best linguists eventually translated. The message was an invitation. You have found our embassy. We have been waiting for your species to mature. The moon is not your satellite. It is our outpost. We placed it in your sky 4 billion years ago to watch over your evolution. You have grown well. You have reached the threshold. Soon, very soon, we will come down from our watching place and introduce ourselves properly. Prepare your world. Clean your cities. Make yourselves presentable. The astronauts' silence wasn't ordered. It was agreed upon. Because how do you tell 7 billion people that everything they believed about the moon, about space, about their place in the universe, was a carefully managed experiment? How do you explain that the experiment is almost over and the experimenters are coming to collect their results? My name is Daniel Ashford. I'm 43 years old. I've spent 17 years believing my father was a paranoid drunk who wasted his career on government conspiracy theories. 3 weeks ago, I opened that safe. 2 weeks ago, I started making phone calls. 1 week ago, a man I'd never met showed up at my apartment in Flagstaff, Arizona, with a gun and a proposition. He said his name was Caldwell. He said he could explain everything. He was lying about one of those things. Caldwell had the kind of face that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. His nose bent slightly left. A scar bisected his right eyebrow. His eyes were 2 different shades of brown, one darker than the other, like someone had mismatched them on purpose. He sat in my kitchen chair like he owned it, the gun resting on the table between us, pointed at the salt shaker. You've been making calls, he said, asking questions about Project Sarcophagus. I hadn't heard that name before. My father's journals mentioned code names: Lighthouse, Shepherd, Final Witness, but never Sarcophagus. I don't know what that is. No, you don't. He picked up one of the photographs I'd left spread across the table. The one showing a street, I couldn't call it anything else, running between 2 rows of black buildings, with figures standing motionless on either side. But you found these, and you started talking. And now people who've spent 50 years keeping this quiet are very, very nervous. The gun hadn't moved, neither had I. Who are you? I asked. I told you. Caldwell. That's not what I meant. He set the photograph down carefully like it might shatter. I'm the man they send when someone gets too close. Usually I make problems disappear. Files, evidence, sometimes people. He smiled, and it didn't reach his mismatched eyes. But you're different, Daniel. You're not some journalist chasing clicks. You're not a conspiracy nut with a podcast. You're Harold Ashford's son. And that means you might actually be useful. My father's name in this stranger's mouth made something twist in my chest. Harold Ashford had died alone in a veterans' hospital in Tucson, his liver failing, his mind half gone, mumbling about the watchers on the moon while nurses changed his bedpan. I'd visited twice in his final year. Twice in 12 months. I told myself I was busy. I told myself he wouldn't remember anyway. The truth was simpler and uglier. I'd been ashamed of him. Useful how, I managed. Caldwell reached into his jacket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a photograph of his own. He slid it across the table. It showed a man in a hospital bed, thin, pale, tubes running into his arms. His eyes were open, staring at nothing, and his mouth was frozen mid-word. I recognized the room. I recognized the man. Eugene Whitmore, Caldwell said. Lunar Module Pilot, Apollo 17. The astronaut who wept when he saw what was inside that building. He's been in a private care facility outside Albuquerque for the past 8 years. Severe catatonia, hasn't spoken a word since 2017. What happened to him? We don't know. One day he was giving lectures at the Smithsonian, and the next he was. Caldwell gestured at the photograph. Like this, the doctors say his brain is fine, normal activity, normal scans. He just won't wake up, won't respond, like he's waiting for something. I stared at Whitmore's frozen face. The expression wasn't fear, it wasn't peace, it was anticipation. The same word my father had used. 3 weeks ago, Caldwell continued, he spoke, just once. A nurse heard him whisper something in the middle of the night. She wrote it down before she forgot. The words didn't make sense to her. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. They made sense to us. I unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, feminine, rushed. It said, "The son will open the door, the son of the keeper. He has the key and doesn't know it." The kitchen felt smaller. The walls pressed in. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights sweeping across the window, and I flinched like it was a searchlight. "That's why I'm here, Daniel." Caldwell's voice had softened. Not kind, calculated. "We've been watching you since you opened that safe. We know about the calls you made, the archive in Houston that wouldn't return your messages, the retired NASA administrator who hung up when you mentioned Taurus Littrow. You're following your father's footsteps whether you know it or not." "I just wanted to understand," I said. "He spent his whole life on this, ruined his marriage, lost his friends, drank himself to death. I wanted to know if any of it was real." "It's real." Caldwell stood, leaving the gun on the table, a gesture of trust or a test. "It's more real than you can imagine. And right now, something is happening. Something your father predicted in his journals. Something Whitmore tried to warn us about before he went silent. The threshold he mentioned, the experiment reaching its end. It's not a metaphor, Daniel. It's a countdown." "A countdown to what?" He walked to my window and looked out at the Flagstaff night. The San Francisco peaks were invisible in the darkness, but I knew they were there. I'd grown up in their shadow. My father used to take me hiking on Humphreys Peak before everything fell apart, before the paranoia consumed him, before he started seeing watchers in every photograph and listeners in every phone call. "There's a facility," Caldwell said, his back to me, "about 3 hours from here, built in 1973, right after the Apollo program ended. Officially, it's a decommissioned research station. Unofficially, it's where they've been keeping everything your father helped hide. The sphere, the photographs, the equipment the astronauts brought back." He turned. "And something else. Something they found last month during a routine excavation." "What did they find?" Caldwell's jaw tightened. For the first time, I saw something behind his professional mask. It might have been fear. "A door," he said, "buried 60 feet underground, made of the same black stone as the buildings in your photographs. And Daniel, it's been opening, slowly, millimeter by millimeter, For the past 31 days it's been opening and nothing we do can stop it. He picked up his gun and holstered it. Pack a bag. We leave in an hour. And Daniel, bring those photographs. All of them. The drive took us south on A17, then west on back roads that didn't appear on my phone's GPS. Caldwell drove a black Suburban with government plates and a dashboard cluttered with coffee cups and crumpled receipts. The ordinariness of it unsettled me more than a sterile agency vehicle would have. This was a man who lived in his car, who spent more time on roads like this than in any home. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked, somewhere past Prescott. "Doing what?" "Chasing down people who find things they shouldn't." He was quiet for a mile, too. The desert night scrolled past, all black sage and distant lightning. 19 years, he finally said. "Started right out of the army. They recruited me because I could follow orders without asking questions. Took me about a decade to start asking them anyway." "And what answers did you find?" "Enough to know your father wasn't crazy." He glanced at me, his mismatched eyes catching the dashboard glow. "He was one of the best, you know. The alteration work he did, it wasn't just erasing things from photographs, it was art. He could remove an entire building from an image and make you believe it was never there. The shadows, the dust patterns, the way light fell on the surrounding terrain. Nobody else could do it like Harold." I didn't know what to say. My memories of my father were clouded by arguments, by slammed doors, by the smell of whiskey on his breath at 9 in the morning. The man Caldwell described, meticulous, talented, essential, felt like a stranger. "He tried to tell me once," I said, "when I was 19, right before I left for college. He sat me down and said he had something important to show me. But he'd been drinking, and I was so damn tired of his conspiracies, his paranoia. I told him I didn't want to hear it, told him to get help." "What did he do?" "He cried. Just sat there at the kitchen table and cried. I left the next morning. We never talked about it again." The memory sat between us like a third passenger. I'd carried that guilt for 24 years. It had calcified into something I barely noticed anymore. A dull ache in my chest that flared up on Father's Day and birthdays and the anniversary of his death. Caldwell didn't offer comfort. I appreciated that. We turned onto a dirt road around 2 in the morning. The Suburban's headlights caught a chain-link fence topped with razor wire, then a guard booth manned by 2 soldiers in unmarked uniforms. Caldwell showed credentials. Words were exchanged. The gate opened. The facility sprawled across a valley floor, a collection of prefabricated buildings and antenna arrays and equipment I couldn't identify. It looked like a dozen other government installations I'd seen in documentaries, bland, functional, forgettable. The kind of place designed to be overlooked. But there was something wrong with the air here. It pressed against my eardrums like the feeling before a thunderstorm. That electric anticipation that makes your skin prickle. I rubbed my arms. The hair was standing up. "You feel it," Caldwell said. It wasn't a question. "What is it?" "We don't know. It started when the door began opening. Some kind of field, maybe. Radiation. The scientists have theories, but none of them explain why it only affects certain people." He parked outside the largest building. "Your father felt it too the first time he came here. Said it felt like someone was watching him from very far away, like being seen through a telescope." We entered through a security checkpoint that scanned my retinas, my fingerprints, my face from 6 different angles. A young technician with red hair and a nervous disposition handed me a badge that read, "Visitor Ashford D, Level 3 Access." "Dr. Brennan is waiting in the observation room," the technician said. His name tag read Colton. He couldn't have been older than 25, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I can take you there, sir, both of you." We followed him through corridors that smelled of recycled air and industrial cleaner. Colton walked quickly, his shoulders hunched, glancing back at us every few seconds like he expected us to disappear. "First time at the site?" he asked me. "Yes." "It gets easier. The feeling, I mean. You stop noticing it after a while. Or maybe you just get used to being watched." He laughed, a brittle sound. "That's what Dr. Brennan says anyway. I think he's full of crap, but don't tell him I said that." The observation room was a wide space dominated by monitors and control panels, staffed by a dozen men in white coats and military uniforms. But my attention went immediately to the window that covered the far wall and what lay beyond it. The excavation pit dropped 60 feet into the earth, its walls shored up with steel and concrete. Floodlights illuminated every inch of the descent, and at the bottom, half buried in Arizona bedrock, was the door. It was black. Not painted black, not stained black, but a black that seemed to swallow the light around it, that made my eyes slide away no matter how hard I tried to focus. It was perhaps 20 feet tall and 10 feet wide, with no visible hinges or handles. The surface was covered in symbols that matched the ones in my father's photographs. The same angular script, the same alien geometry. And it was open, just barely. A gap of perhaps 3 inches ran along its right edge, revealing nothing but deeper darkness beyond. "Daniel Ashford," a voice beside me. I turned to find a tall man with silver hair and a face that had probably been handsome before exhaustion carved trenches under his eyes. "I'm Brennan. Your father spoke of you often." "You knew him?" "I worked with him for 15 years. He was brilliant. Stubborn as hell, but brilliant." Brennan shook my hand. His grip was firm, but his palm was damp. "He always said you'd come eventually. Said the Watchers would call you when they were ready." "What does that mean?" Brennan turned to the window, to the door. 52 years ago, 3 astronauts walked into a building on the moon and found a sphere covered in symbols. We've spent half a century trying to understand those symbols. The message about the embassy, the invitation, that was just the surface translation. The deeper layers took decades to decode. He pulled up something on a nearby monitor. Lines of text, charts, diagrams. The full message wasn't just an invitation, Daniel. It was a set of instructions, specifications for a receiving station, a place to welcome them when they arrived. "This facility," I said. "No, this facility was built to study what we found. But 6 months ago, ground-penetrating radar detected something beneath us. Something that had been here long before humans walked this continent. We started digging." He gestured at the pit. "That door has been buried for at least 12,000 years, and according to the symbols, it's not an entrance." "Then what is it?" Brennan's face was pale in the monitor light. "It's a birth canal," he said. "Something is on the other side. Something that's been gestating for millennia, waiting for the right conditions. The sphere wasn't just a message, it was a trigger. When the astronauts brought it back to Earth, they started a biological clock that's been ticking down ever since." He checked his watch, a nervous habit. "Based on our calculations, that door will be fully open in approximately 72 hours. And then what? That's what we need you to help us figure out." Brennan pulled out a familiar leather journal, my father's journal, the one that should have been in my apartment. "Your father believed you were the key to stopping it. He spent the last 10 years of his life trying to find a way to close that door permanently. And right before he died, he told me he'd finally figured it out." He handed me the journal. A page was marked with a faded ribbon. "He said only his son would understand, that the answer was something only you would recognize." I opened to the marked page, my father's handwriting, shaky but legible. It was a drawing, a child's drawing, done in crayon, a stick figure holding hands with a larger stick figure, standing on a green hill under a yellow sun. Mountains in the background. I remembered making it. I was 6 years old. I'd given it to him for Father's Day. Beneath it, in my father's hand. "The door remembers what we loved. Danny will know what to do." I stared at the drawing, at the memory I'd forgotten existed, and somewhere below us, in that pit of light and darkness, I heard something move. Something large. Something that had been waiting a very long time. The sound stopped as quickly as it started. A single wet scrape like meat dragging across stone, and then nothing. The monitors showed no movement. The sensors detected no change. But everyone in that observation room had heard it, and nobody was pretending otherwise. "That's new," Colton said, his voice cracking on the second word. Brennan was already at a console, pulling up seismic readings, thermal imaging, audio waveforms. His fingers moved with the speed of long practice, but I noticed the slight tremor in his hands. "Fourth time today," he muttered. "Each occurrence is louder than the last. Whatever's behind that door, it's becoming more active." "Or more aware," Caldwell said. He stood at the window, his reflection ghostly against the floodlit pit. "It knows we're watching." I should have been terrified. Part of me was a small, rational part that wanted to run back to Flagstaff, burn my father's photographs, and pretend none of this was real. But a larger part felt something else entirely. Recognition. Like seeing a face you've forgotten but your body remembers. "I need to go down there," I said. Every head in the room turned toward me. "Absolutely not." Brennan stepped away from his console. "That pit is a contamination zone. We have no idea what kind of biological agents might be present. The teams that excavated the door wore full hazmat gear, and 3 of them still developed symptoms." "What symptoms?" Brennan exchanged a glance with Caldwell. Something passed between them, a silent negotiation I wasn't part of. "Dreams," Brennan finally said. "Vivid, persistent dreams." All 3 men reported the same imagery, standing on the moon, looking up at Earth, surrounded by figures made of shadow. They said the figures were teaching them something, a language, a way of seeing. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. One of them, a structural engineer named Holloway, started writing in his sleep. Filled 17 notebooks with symbols identical to those on the door. When he woke up, he couldn't read a word of it, couldn't even recognize his own handwriting. "Where is he now?" "Room 14, medical wing." Brennan replaced his glasses. "He stopped sleeping 3 days ago. Says every time he closes his eyes, he sees what's behind the door. Says it's beautiful, Daniel. Says it wants to meet us." The observation room felt smaller. The recycled air tasted stale on my tongue. I thought about Eugene Whitmore in his Albuquerque hospital bed, frozen in anticipation, waiting for something only he could see. "My father spent time down there," I said, "didn't he?" "Harold had full access to the excavation site. He insisted on it, said he needed to understand the door to find a way to close it." "And did he understand it?" Brennan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Your father believed the door wasn't just a physical barrier. He thought it was a kind of membrane, a boundary between states of being, the things on the other side. He didn't think they were creatures in any sense we'd recognize, more like ideas waiting to take form, potential waiting to become actual. That doesn't make sense." "No, it doesn't." Brennan smiled, but there was no humor in it. "None of this makes sense, Daniel. We've spent 50 years trying to apply human logic to something fundamentally inhuman. Your father was the first person to suggest that maybe logic wasn't the answer. Maybe the door doesn't respond to reason. Maybe it responds to something else." "Like what?" "Memory, emotion, the things that make us human rather than just intelligent." He pointed at the journal in my hands. "That's why he left you the drawing. He believed the door could be influenced by powerful personal experiences. Love, loss, the bonds between parent and child." I looked at the crayon drawing again, the 2 stick figures holding hands, the green hill, the yellow sun, Humphrey's Peak in the background. I recognized it now, that distinctive shape I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. "He took me hiking there," I said, "every summer until I was 12. We'd camp at the base and climb to the summit the next morning. He called it our mountain." "I know. He talked about those trips constantly." Brennan's voice softened. He said they were the happiest times of his life. Before the work consumed him. Before he lost you. Something burned behind my eyes. I blinked it away. "I want to see Holloway," I said. "The engineer. I want to talk to him." Caldwell finally turned from the window. "That's not a good idea." "I don't care. If he's dreaming about what's behind that door, maybe he knows something that can help. Maybe he's seen something in those visions that explains what my father figured out." The 2 men looked at each other again, that silent communication. I was getting tired of being outside it. "Fine," Brennan said, "but I'm coming with you. And Daniel, Prepare yourself. Holloway isn't... He's not well." We left the observation room and walked through corridors that grew progressively quieter, more sterile. The medical wing was separated from the rest of the facility by a set of heavy doors that required Brennan's handprint and a 6-digit code. Beyond them, the air smelled different, antiseptic and something else, something organic. Room 14 was at the end of the hall. A window in the door showed a small space lit by a single lamp. The walls were covered in paper, hundreds of sheets taped and pinned and stapled to every available surface, each one filled with the same angular symbols I'd seen on the door. They spiraled outward from the bed like the growth rings of a diseased tree. And sitting on the bed, his back to us, was a man in hospital scrubs, writing furiously in a notebook. His shoulders hunched with each stroke of his pen. He never paused, never hesitated. The writing flowed from him like breathing. Brennan knocked, no response. He tried again, harder this time. The man didn't even flinch. It was as if we existed in a different reality, one that couldn't touch him. Brennan opened the door. "Thomas, you have a visitor." Holloway didn't turn around. His pen kept moving, scratching across paper with a rhythm that was almost musical. I stepped into the room and immediately felt that pressure again, the watching sensation, the telescope feeling. It was stronger here, much stronger. "Thomas," I said, "my name is Daniel Ashford, Harold Ashford's son." The pen stopped. Slowly, Holloway turned. He was maybe 40, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of years working outdoors. His eyes were bloodshot, the whites turned pink from burst capillaries. But it was his expression that made my breath catch. He was smiling, a wide, beatific smile, like a man who'd found religion. "The Keeper's son," he whispered. "I've seen you in the dark behind my eyes. You're standing at the door. You're the only one who can open it all the way." "I don't want to open it. I want to close it." Holloway laughed. It was a gentle sound, almost pitying. "Close it? Why would you close it? Don't you understand what's waiting? What they're offering?" "What are they offering?" He stood up, moved toward me. Brennan tensed, but Holloway wasn't threatening. His movements were slow, dreamlike. "Transcendence," he said. "An end to separation. An end to loneliness. They've been watching humanity since before we could speak. They've loved us, Daniel. Loved us like parents love children. And now we're finally ready to join them. To become what they always intended us to be." "And what's that?" Holloway reached out and touched my face. His fingers were ice cold. "Family," he said. "One mind, one purpose. No more pain, no more grief. No more fathers dying alone while their sons refused to visit." I jerked back like I'd been burned. Holloway's smile didn't waver. "They know everything about you, Daniel. Every regret, every wound. They showed me. They showed me how much your father loved you. How he spent his final years trying to protect you from them, even though joining them was the only thing he truly wanted." Holloway's voice dropped to a whisper. "He fought it so hard. The longing, the call. He could have gone to them, could have stepped through the door years ago. But he stayed because of you, because he hoped you'd come back to him, that you'd forgive him." "Stop. He died thinking you hated him, Daniel. The last word he spoke was your name." Something cracked inside me. A wall I'd built 24 years ago, brick by brick, lie by lie. I'd told myself I was protecting myself from his madness. I'd told myself that distance was healthy, that cutting him off was an act of self-preservation. I'd told myself a lot of things in the dark of sleepless nights, when his voice echoed in my memory, asking me to just listen, just once. "Please, Danny, just let me show you." The truth was uglier. I was punishing him for not being the father I wanted, for choosing the moon over me, for letting his obsession hollow out our family until there was nothing left but secrets and silence. But he hadn't chosen the moon, he'd chosen me. He'd stayed human, stayed separate from whatever those things were, because he loved me, and I'd repaid that sacrifice by letting him die alone. Enough. Brennan stepped between us. Thomas, that's enough. But Holloway wasn't looking at me anymore. His eyes had gone distant, focused on something none of us could see. They're almost here, he said. 71 hours, 32 minutes. I can hear them breathing. I can feel them pressing against the membrane. His smile widened. And they're so hungry, Doctor, so very, very hungry. His eyes rolled back. His body went rigid. And then he started screaming, not in fear, but in ecstasy, a sound of terrible joy that echoed off the sterile walls and followed us as Brennan dragged me out of the room and the door slammed shut behind us. Through the window, I watched Holloway collapse onto his bed, still smiling, still making that sound. His body twitched with small convulsions, each one punctuated by another cry of terrible joy. Brennan was pale. His hands shook as he locked the door. A bead of sweat ran down his temple despite the cold air. "Now you understand," he said quietly. "Now you see what we're dealing with." But I wasn't thinking about Holloway. I was thinking about my father, dying alone in that Tucson hospital, my name on his lips. The door remembers what we loved. Maybe I was finally beginning to understand what that meant. Brennan took me to his office, a cramped room cluttered with books, files, and the detritus of decades spent chasing answers that refused to be caught. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle he kept in his desk drawer and handed one to me without asking if I wanted it. I drank it in one swallow. He refilled it. "Your father warned me this would happen," Brennan said, settling into his chair. "He said when you finally came, you'd be broken open, that it was necessary." "Necessary for what?" "For understanding." He sipped his own drink, staring at the wall behind me. "The door doesn't respond to intellect, Daniel. We've tried everything. Explosives, drilling, electromagnetic pulses. Nothing even scratches it. But your father theorized that it operates on a different frequency, an emotional frequency. The beings behind it, they're not just watching our technology, they're watching our souls." I laughed. It came out harsh, bitter. "You sound like him. He used to talk like that after his 3rd drink. Soul this, spirit that. I thought he'd lost his mind." Maybe he found something bigger than his mind could hold. Brennan leaned forward. "I'm a scientist, Daniel. I've spent my career demanding evidence, reproducible results, peer review. And everything I've seen in this facility has taught me that science is a flashlight in an infinite dark. We illuminate what we can, but most of reality lies outside our little circle of light." Through the office window, I could see a slice of the observation room, monitors glowing, staff moving in the careful choreography of controlled panic. Somewhere beneath us, that door was still opening, millimeter by millimeter. "What did my father actually figure out?" I asked. "You said he found a way to close it. What was it?" Brennan was quiet for a long moment. He finished his whiskey and set the glass down with exaggerated care. "He believed the door could be sealed by someone who embodied a specific kind of love. Not romantic love, not abstract love for humanity, something more primal, the love between parent and child." He met my eyes. "The beings on the other side, they don't reproduce the way we do. They don't have offspring. The concept of a parent sacrificing everything for a child is alien to them. Literally incomprehensible. Harold thought that incomprehension was a weakness, a blind spot." "So what? I'm supposed to love the door closed?" "Not exactly." Brennan stood and walked to a filing cabinet. He pulled out a folder thick with yellowed papers. "Your father developed a theory he called emotional resonance. The idea that powerful human experiences leave imprints on physical reality. Places where terrible things happened feel different. You've experienced that, I'm sure. Battlefields, murder sites. They carry a weight that science can't measure, but everyone can feel." "What does that have to do with the door?" "The door is a receiver, Daniel. It's tuned to pick up certain frequencies from our world. Fear, loneliness, the desire to transcend individual existence. Those are the signals that wake up whatever is on the other side." He handed me the folder. But your father believed it could be retuned, overloaded with a different frequency, one so foreign to those beings that it would act like static, like noise drowning out a signal. I opened the folder. Inside were pages of equations I couldn't understand, diagrams of the door with annotations in my father's handwriting, and photographs, dozens of photographs, all of them showing the same thing. Me, at different ages. As a baby in my father's arms, as a toddler taking my first steps, as a child on Humphrey's Peak, grinning at the camera with a gap-toothed smile. He collected these over the years, Brennan said quietly. Every photo he could find of you, every memory he could document. He said they were his ammunition, his weapon against the door. My hands trembled, the photographs blurred. But he never got to use them, I said. He died before the door started opening. Yes, and that's where things get complicated. Brennan sat on the edge of his desk, closer to me now. We've been operating under the assumption that the door's opening is automatic, a countdown triggered by the sphere, but 3 days ago we discovered something that changes everything. He pulled up an image on his computer, security footage, grainy and time-stamped. It showed the excavation pit from above, the door visible at the bottom, and standing in front of the door, one hand pressed against its surface, was a figure in a white coat. I recognized the silver hair, the tall frame. "That's you," I said. "That's me," Brennan confirmed. His voice was flat. 3 nights ago. I have no memory of going down there. I woke up in my quarters the next morning with dirt under my fingernails and a gap in my memory spanning 6 hours. The door didn't start opening on its own, Daniel. Someone opened it. And based on the footage, based on what Holloway has been writing in his notebooks, I think that someone was me. His hands gripped the edge of the desk, white-knuckled. They've been inside my head for weeks, maybe months, guiding my decisions, steering me toward this moment. Every choice I thought I was making freely, bringing in new researchers, approving the deeper excavation, dismissing the warning signs. It was all them. They were wearing me like a suit. I thought about Holloway's smile, that terrible serenity. Can you feel them now? Every second. Brennan's voice cracked. They're patient, Daniel. So incredibly patient. They've been waiting 12,000 years for this. What's a few more hours to them? They let me have these moments of clarity because they know it doesn't matter, because they know I'll do what they want in the end. Then why bring me here? Why tell me any of this? Because I can still feel them, Daniel, right now, whispering in the back of my mind, telling me to trust you, to give you access to the pit, to let you walk right up to that door and press your hand against it like I did. His jaw tightened. And I don't know if that's what we should do or if it's exactly what they want. I don't know if I'm warning you or leading you into a trap. Caldwell's voice came from the doorway. It's what they want. I spun. He stood there with his gun drawn, but not pointed at either of us. His mismatched eyes were fixed on Brennan. I had my suspicions, Caldwell said. The way you pushed to bring Ashford's son here, the way you kept steering conversations back to the door. You were too eager, Doc. Too certain. I know. Brennan didn't move. That's why I'm telling you now. While I still can. While there's still enough of me left to fight them. He looked at me, and I saw the fear beneath his calm facade. The desperation. Your father believed you could close the door, Daniel. He spent 10 years preparing for this moment. But he also knew it would require a sacrifice. Something given freely, out of love, with full knowledge of the cost. What kind of sacrifice? Brennan's answer was barely a whisper. The person who closes the door doesn't come back. They become part of it. Their consciousness merges with the barrier, holding it shut from the inside. Forever. He swallowed hard. Your father was going to do it himself. That's why he kept working here even after his health failed. He was going to sacrifice himself to protect you, to protect everyone. But he ran out of time. The photographs in my hands felt heavier now. All those images of my childhood, all those memories of a father I'd abandoned, birthday parties I barely remembered, Christmas mornings in our old house on Cedar Street, the camping trip where I caught my first fish and he'd been so proud he'd taken a dozen pictures, laughing the whole time. He'd been planning to die for me, to spend eternity holding a door closed so that I could live in a world that never knew the threat existed. He'd spent his final years gathering evidence of our love, cataloguing every moment of connection between us, turning our shared history into a weapon against something older than human civilization. And I'd let him rot in a hospital bed, too proud and too angry to say goodbye, too wrapped up in my own resentment to see what he was really doing, what he was really protecting. 69 hours, Caldwell said, checking his watch. The gun was still in his hand, though he'd lowered it slightly. That's how long we have. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide now. I looked at the photographs, at the face of a man I'd never really known. Maybe it was time to finally understand him. We spent the next 6 hours going through my father's research. Brennan, despite his compromised state, was the only one who understood the technical aspects. Caldwell watched him like a hawk watches a rabbit, never letting his hand stray far from his weapon. I sat between them, reading journals and notes that painted a picture of a man I wished I'd known. My father had been brilliant, not just talented, genuinely, profoundly brilliant. His theories about emotional resonance were backed by decades of careful observation, documented experiments, and mathematical models that Brennan said had predicted the door's behavior with unsettling accuracy. He'd mapped the relationship between human consciousness and the barrier like a cartographer charting unknown territory. But brilliance hadn't saved him from loneliness. Between the equations and diagrams, I found personal notes, fragments of letters he'd never sent me, apologies for missed birthdays, explanations for why he couldn't be present, promises to make things right when the work was done. I know you hate me, one entry read. I know you think I chose the moon over you. But Danny, if you could see what I've seen, you'd understand. Everything I do is for you, everything I've ever done. The door must stay closed. And if that means losing you to keep you safe, then I'll pay that price gladly. The words blurred. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. Around midnight, Caldwell's phone buzzed. He stepped away to answer it, his voice low and tense. When he returned, his face had gone pale. "We have a problem," he said. "Whitmore is awake." Brennan straightened. "Eugene Whitmore, the astronaut." He woke up 20 minutes ago, started talking. The staff at his facility tried to sedate him, but he... Caldwell paused, choosing his words. He walked out, past security, past locked doors, past everything. They said he moved like the obstacles weren't there, like he was walking through them. "Where is he now?" "Driving. Based on his trajectory, he'll be here in about 4 hours." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "He's coming home," he said. "He's coming to open the door." The observation room erupted into controlled chaos. Staff scrambled to secure entrances, check perimeter sensors, prepare for an arrival that no one understood how to prevent. Brennan coordinated from his console, but I could see the strain in his movements, the way his hands hesitated over certain controls, the way his eyes would lose focus for a moment before snapping back. They were still in his head, whispering, guiding. I pulled him aside while Caldwell barked orders at the security team. "How much time do you have?" I asked quietly. "Before you lose yourself completely?" Brennan's laugh was hollow. "Hours, maybe. I can feel them getting stronger. Every time that door opens another millimeter, their grip tightens." He gripped my arm, his fingers digging in. "Listen to me, Daniel. Whatever happens, don't let me near that door. Don't let me touch it again. If I start walking toward the pit, you tell Caldwell to shoot me. Promise me." "I promise." "And Daniel," his voice dropped to a whisper, "your father's plan might work. But there's something he didn't account for. Something I've only recently understood." "What?" "The sacrifice has to be willing, truly willing. Not just resigned, not just accepting. The person who seals that door has to want it, has to choose it with their whole heart." His eyes searched mine. "Your father was prepared to die. But I don't think he wanted to. I think part of him resented the necessity, and that resentment, that reluctance, it might have weakened the seal. It might have given them a crack to exploit. So you're saying even if I do this, it might not work?" I'm saying it will only work if you mean it. If you go to that door carrying anger, carrying guilt, carrying anything but pure love, they'll use it. They'll twist it. They'll turn your sacrifice into their victory. Before I could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights strobed. A voice over the intercom announced perimeter breach, Sector 7. Whitmore was early. I followed Caldwell to the security station where monitors showed a single figure walking across the desert toward the facility. The cameras caught him in infrared, a bright human shape moving with mechanical precision across the cold landscape. He wasn't running, wasn't hurrying, just walking, one foot in front of the other, like a man taking a stroll through a park. He's still 2 miles out, a security officer said. We could intercept. With what? Caldwell asked. You saw the footage from Albuquerque. Bullets went through him like he wasn't there. Tasers, tranquilizers, physical restraint. Nothing worked. He's not operating under normal physics anymore. Then what do we do? Caldwell looked at me. We use the time we have. Daniel, you need to go down to the door, now, before Whitmore gets here. But I don't know what to do. I don't know how to close it. Your father believed you would figure it out. He believed the answer was in those photographs, in those memories. He spent 10 years betting everything on you. Caldwell handed me the folder of photographs and my father's journal. I don't know if he was right, but I know that if you don't try, that door opens all the way, and whatever comes through isn't going to care about any of us. The elevator descended into the pit with agonizing slowness. I stood alone in the metal cage, surrounded by floodlights and scaffolding, watching the door grow larger as I dropped toward it. The air changed as I descended, grew thicker, heavier, charged with something that made the fillings in my teeth ache. From above, the door had seemed abstract, a dark rectangle in the earth, a problem to be solved. Up close, it was something else entirely. The black stone seemed to breathe. Not literally, not visibly, but I could feel it, a slow expansion and contraction, like the belly of some vast, sleeping creature. The symbols carved into its surface moved in my peripheral vision, rearranging themselves whenever I wasn't looking directly at them. They formed shapes that almost resembled letters, almost resembled faces, almost resembled nothing at all. And the gap along the right edge, that 3-inch opening that had grown to nearly 6 inches over the past hours, exhaled a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. It was the cold of deep space, the cold of absolute emptiness, the cold of being watched by something that had never known warmth. I stepped off the elevator onto the excavation floor. The pressure in my ears intensified, that watching feeling wrapped around me like a blanket, intimate and suffocating. The photographs were in my hands. I spread them on the ground in front of the door, arranging them chronologically. Baby pictures first, then toddler, then child, then teenager, then adult. My entire life laid out in images, every moment my father had tried to capture. I don't know if you can hear me, I said to the door, to whatever was behind it. I don't know if you understand anything I'm saying, but my father believed this would work. He believed that love was something you couldn't comprehend, something that would sound like static to you. The cold from the gap deepened. I could see my breath now, little clouds of vapor catching the floodlight. He was wrong about a lot of things. He was an alcoholic and a bad husband and an absent father. He chose his work over his family, and he never learned how to apologize for it. My voice cracked. But he loved me. I know that now. He loved me enough to spend 30 years protecting a secret that would have driven most people insane. He loved me enough to plan his own death just to keep me safe. The symbols on the door were definitely moving now, swirling, converging toward the gap. And I loved him. Even when I hated him, I loved him. Even when I refused to visit, even when I let him die alone, I loved him. I just didn't know how to show it. I didn't know how to forgive him for not being perfect. Something stirred in the darkness beyond the gap. A sound like breathing, like voices, like wind through empty corridors. So here's what I'm offering you, not my death, not some noble sacrifice. I'm offering you the truth. I'm offering you 24 years of regret and 1 moment of clarity. I pressed my hand against the door. The cold bit into my palm. I forgive him. I forgive my father for everything he did and everything he didn't do. And I forgive myself for being too stubborn to say it when he was alive. The door shuddered. The gap began to close. But then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Deliberate. And a voice I recognized from the photograph Caldwell had shown me in my kitchen. "That's beautiful, Daniel, really, but you're missing the point." I turned. Eugene Whitmore stood at the edge of the excavation floor, still wearing his hospital scrubs, his face serene. Behind him, I could see Brennan descending in the elevator, his movements stiff, his eyes vacant. "Your father understood the door," Whitmore said, walking toward me, "but he never understood us. He thought we were invaders, parasites, something to be fought." He smiled, and it was the same smile Holloway had worn. That terrible peace. "We're not your enemies, Daniel. We're your evolution. We've been guiding humanity since before you could walk upright. Every leap forward, fire, language, agriculture, science. We whispered those ideas into receptive minds. We've been cultivating you, preparing you." "For what?" "For joining us." He gestured at the door. "That's not a barrier. It's a chrysalis, and humanity is finally ready to emerge." The gap had stopped closing. The symbols swirled faster, chaotic, conflicted. "Your love is strong, Daniel, stronger than we anticipated, but love isn't enough to seal the door." Whitmore stopped a few feet away. His eyes were kind, understanding. "It takes two, a parent and a child, choosing together. Your father knew that. That's why he waited. That's why he kept you away. He was hoping he'd live long enough to stand here with you." Behind Whitmore, Brennan stepped off the elevator. His hand rose, reaching toward the door. "He didn't make it," Whitmore continued, "but I did. And I remember everything, Daniel. Everything the astronauts saw. Everything they felt. The things behind that door showed me what your father discovered in his final days." He held out his hand. "He found a way to close it, but he needed you. He needed his son." "Why would you tell me this? If you want the door open." "Because I don't want the door open." Whitmore's voice cracked. For a moment, the serenity flickered, and I saw the man beneath, terrified, desperate, clinging to the last shreds of himself. "They're inside me, Daniel. They've been inside me for 50 years, but they made a mistake. They let me keep my memories. They let me remember my own son, the one who grew up without me, the one who died in a car accident in 1989 while I was trapped in my own mind." Tears streamed down his face. The man who had walked on the moon, who had kept a secret for half a century, who had been a prisoner in his own body for longer than I'd been alive. "I want to close the door. I want to seal them away forever, and I know how." He took my hand. His grip was ice-cold but human, trembling. "Your father figured it out. It's not one sacrifice. It's two. A father and a son together, one on each side of the door." Behind us, Brennan's hand touched the black stone. His lips moved, forming words in a language that predated humanity, and the door began to open wider. The gap widened to 8 inches, 10. The cold pouring through it now carried sounds, whispers in languages that had never been spoken by human tongues, a chorus of voices layered over each other like sediment in ancient rock. I could almost make out words, almost understand what they were saying, and part of me wanted to lean closer, to press my ear to that opening and finally hear the message clearly. Whitmore yanked me back. "Don't listen," he said. "That's how they get in, through the wanting, through the curiosity." His grip on my arm was painful, grounding. I listened for 3 days on the moon. By the time we left, I wasn't entirely myself anymore. None of us were. Brennan stood at the door, both palms pressed flat against the black stone. His mouth moved constantly, whispering in that ancient language, and with each word, the gap grew wider. His eyes were open but empty, windows into a house where no one lived anymore. "Can we stop him?" I asked. "Not without killing him, and maybe not even then." Whitmore's face was grim. They're using his body like a key. As long as he's touching the door, they can push it open from the other side. Then we pull him away. I tried that in Albuquerque, with myself. The connection isn't physical, Daniel. It's deeper than that. They're threaded through his nervous system like roots through soil. Yanking him free would tear him apart. The gap was a foot wide now. I could see movement in the darkness beyond, shapes that didn't resolve into anything recognizable, geometries that shifted and folded in on themselves. The floodlights should have illuminated the space behind the door, but the light stopped at the threshold like it was hitting a wall. Then what do we do? Whitmore turned to face me fully. In the harsh, artificial light, I could see the toll that 50 years of possession had taken. The deep lines carved into his face, the tremor in his hands, the way his body seemed to be held together by will alone. "Your father's plan," he said. "Two people, one on each side, a parent and a child bound by love, creating a seal that they can't break because they can't understand it. But you're not my father." "No, but I was a father once. My boy, Timothy. He was 7 when I left for the moon, 12 when I came back wrong, 32 when he died." Whitmore's voice cracked. "I missed his whole life, Daniel. Every little league game, every school play, every nightmare where he needed his dad to tell him it was okay. My wife tried to explain it to him, told him I was sick, that I'd get better. But kids know. They always know when something's wrong." He paused, gathering himself. "Timothy visited me once when he was 25, sat by my bed and talked for 3 hours, told me about his job, his girlfriend, his plans for the future. And I heard every word, Daniel. I was screaming inside my own skull, trying to reach him, trying to tell him I loved him, but nothing came out. Not a word. Not a blink. He left thinking I didn't even know he was there." His hands trembled. "He died 7 years later. Car accident on I-40 outside Amarillo. And I was there in body but gone in every way that mattered. The things behind that door stole my son from me as surely as if they'd killed him with their own hands." He took both my hands in his. "I can't close this door for Timothy. It's too late for that. But I can close it with you. I can be the father you needed and never had. And maybe, in some small way, that will mean something." The whispers from the gap were louder now. I could feel them trying to worm into my thoughts, offering comfort, offering understanding, offering an end to all the pain I'd carried for 24 years. All I had to do was step through. All I had to do was let go. "It won't work," I said. "We're strangers. There's no love between us, no history, no bond. Love isn't built only on history." Whitmore squeezed my hands. "It's built on choice, on deciding that someone matters, on being willing to sacrifice for them even when you have no reason to." His eyes, clear now, fully human, held mine. "I choose you, Daniel. I choose to love you like a son. Not because of who you are, but because of who I could have been. Because every father who ever failed his child deserves a chance to make it right." Something shifted in my chest, a loosening, a release. I thought about my father, alone in that hospital room, whispering my name to empty air. I thought about all the years I'd wasted being angry, being righteous, being certain that I was the victim and he was the villain. I thought about the photographs spread on the ground around us, evidence of a love I'd been too blind to see. "Okay," I said, "tell me what to do." Whitmore explained quickly. The door operated on symmetry. 2 sides, 2 seals, 2 sacrifices. One person had to remain on this side, anchoring the barrier to human reality. The other had to go through, anchoring it from beyond. Together, they would form a circuit that the beings couldn't break. "But going through means joining them," I said, "becoming one of them." "No," Whitmore shook his head. "Going through means becoming something new. Something between. The beings behind the door aren't evil, Daniel. They're just different. Alien in the truest sense. They don't understand love, but that doesn't mean they can't learn. Whoever goes through, they become a teacher, a bridge. They spend eternity showing those things what it means to be human. And the one who stays? They become a guardian, a living lock. They age, they die eventually, but their consciousness persists. bound to the door forever, watching over it, keeping it sealed from this side. His voice softened. Your father wanted to be the guardian. He wanted you to live a normal life, never knowing any of this existed. But the door had other plans. It wanted you here. It wanted the choice to be yours. Behind us, Brennan's whispers rose in pitch. The gap was nearly 2 feet wide. I could see shapes pressing against the opening now, not trying to come through, not yet, but testing, waiting. I'll go through, I said. Whitmore's grip tightened. Daniel! It has to be me. The certainty surprised me. It felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. My father spent his whole life protecting me, keeping me safe from this. If I become the guardian, I'm just continuing his work. But if I go through, I'm doing something he never could. I'm finishing what he started. I'm making his sacrifice mean something. You'll never come back. You'll never see Earth again. Everyone you've ever known will grow old and die while you remain unchanged on the other side of that door. I know. And you're okay with that? I looked at the photographs on the ground. The smiling child on Humphrey's Peak, the gap-toothed grin, my father's arm around my shoulders. My father gave up everything for me, I said. His career, his marriage, his health, his sanity. He spent 30 years in that classified facility, erasing evidence of what he'd seen, protecting a world that would never thank him. And when he finally had a chance to rest, to let someone else carry the burden, he couldn't. Because he loved me too much to let me inherit his pain. I picked up one of the photographs, the Father's Day drawing, the one with the 2 stick figures holding hands. This is my inheritance, I said, not his paranoia, not his secrets, his love, and I'm going to use it to do what he couldn't. I'm going to close this door forever. Whitmore stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Your father would be proud, he said quietly. I hope so. We moved toward the door together, stepping around Brennan's rigid form. The scientist's eyes stared at nothing, his lips still moving in that endless alien chant. There was no saving him now. Whatever Brennan had been was gone, replaced by something that wore his face like a mask. The gap was nearly 3 feet wide now. The darkness beyond pulsed with anticipation. The whispers had become a roar, a cacophony of voices all speaking at once, all saying the same thing in 1,000 different languages. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Whitmore positioned himself on the left side of the door. I stood on the right, facing the gap. The cold radiating from it was so intense now that frost formed on my eyelashes. When you go through, Whitmore said, hold on to the memory, the strongest one you have, the one that defines what love means to you. That's your anchor. That's what will keep you human on the other side. I closed my eyes, and I remembered. Humphrey's Peak. Summer. I was 8 years old. My father and I had climbed to the summit, our legs aching, our lungs burning in the thin air. The last 100 feet had been brutal, loose scree and thin air, and my small legs threatening to give out with every step. But my father had taken my hand and pulled me forward, patient, encouraging, never once suggesting we turn back. We sat on a rock at the top and looked out at the world spread below us, the forests, the deserts, the distant glitter of Flagstaff catching the afternoon sun. The wind was cold at that altitude, but my father wrapped his jacket around my shoulders and kept his arm there, warm and solid and safe. You see all that, Danny, he said. Someday it'll all be yours, the whole world, and my job is to make sure it's still here when you're ready for it. I had laughed and asked if he was going to buy me the whole world. He'd smiled, that rare, genuine smile that I'd almost forgotten existed, and said, something like that. I hadn't understood what he meant, not then, not for another 35 years. But I understood now. Every classified document, every altered photograph, every sleepless night and missed birthday and ruined relationship. It had all been for this, for the world, for me. I opened my eyes, took a breath, and stepped toward the gap. Whitmore's hand caught mine at the last moment, not to stop me, to anchor me, to connect us. Together, he said, Together, I agreed. And then I walked through the door, carrying my father's love like a lantern into the infinite dark, leaving the world behind to keep it safe forever. The other side wasn't dark. That was the first surprise. I'd expected blackness, emptiness, the cold void that had been breathing through the gap. Instead, I found myself standing in light, soft, diffuse, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The ground beneath my feet was smooth and warm, like sun-heated stone, though I couldn't see any sun. And I wasn't alone. They surrounded me in a vast circle, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The figures from my father's photographs. Up close, they were both more and less human than I'd expected. They had bodies, limbs, what might have been faces, but their proportions were wrong in ways that made my brain itch. Too long here, too short there, joints that bent in directions joints shouldn't bend. They were made of something that looked like shadow given weight, like darkness that had learned to stand upright. None of them moved. They just watched, waiting. Daniel Ashford. The voice came from all of them at once, a chorus speaking in perfect unison. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't friendly. It simply was. You have come through the door. You have chosen to join us. I've chosen to close the door, I said. My voice sounded strange here, flattened, echoless, like speaking into a pillow. I've chosen to seal it forever. Yes, we know. The chorus shifted, harmonics changing. We have watched your family for 3 generations. Your grandfather, your father, now you. Each of you was supposed to open the door. Each of you chose differently. That stopped me. My grandfather? Bernard Ashford. He worked on the early satellite programs. He saw our cities in the first orbital photographs before the alterations began. We called to him. He refused. He buried the evidence and never spoke of it again. The figures leaned forward slightly, a wave of movement passing through the crowd. Your father inherited his stubbornness and his fear, but also his love. It was the love that made them dangerous to us. Dangerous? Love is difficult. We have studied it for millennia, observed it, catalogued its variations, but we cannot feel it, cannot replicate it. It exists outside our experience like color exists outside the experience of the blind. The chorus paused. Your father understood this. He realized that love was not just an emotion, but a force, a frequency we could not tune to, a language we could not speak. I thought about the photographs scattered on the excavation floor, all those moments of connection, captured and preserved. Ammunition, Brennan had called them. So that's why I'm here, I said. To teach you, to show you what love is. That is one possibility. The figures shifted again. There are others. Like what? You could join us completely. Surrender your individual consciousness, become part of our collective. The door would remain open and humanity would evolve into something greater, something unified. No more loneliness, no more grief, no more fathers dying alone while their sons refused to visit. The words hit like a punch to the chest. They knew. Of course they knew. They'd been watching. That's not evolution, I said. That's extinction. Is it? Your species spends its existence in isolation, each mind a prison, each heart a solitary cell. You reach for connection and find only misunderstanding. You love and lose and love again, knowing that loss is inevitable. The chorus softened. We offer an end to that suffering. We offer communion, permanent, perfect, eternal. For a moment, just a moment, I felt the pull of it, the seduction. How easy it would be to let go, to stop carrying the weight of guilt and regret and memory, to dissolve into something larger and finally rest. But then I remembered my father's face. Not the face from the photographs, the young, smiling man with his arm around a child. The other face, the one I'd seen in that Tucson hospital. Sunken cheeks and yellow skin and eyes that still held hope, even at the end, even after everything. He hadn't given up. He'd never given up. and neither would I. "You're wrong about us," I said. "The suffering isn't a flaw, it's the point. We love because we lose. We connect because we're separate. Every moment of joy is precious because we know it won't last." I stepped forward into the center of their circle. My father spent 30 years in pain, alone, misunderstood. He could have taken the easy path. He could have joined you, but he chose to stay human, to keep loving me even when I gave him nothing in return. And what did that accomplish? He died, alone, forgotten, his sacrifice unknown to the world he protected. It accomplished this. I held up the drawing I'd carried through the door, the crayon stick figures, the green hill, the yellow sun. He gave me something to hold on to, a memory so strong that even you can't take it from me. That's what love does. It outlasts everything, even death. The figures were silent for a long moment. The light around us seemed to dim, or maybe concentrate, drawing inward, focusing on the crumpled piece of paper in my hands. "Show us," the chorus said finally. "Show us what you mean." I closed my eyes, and I let the memory unfold. Not just Humphrey's Peak. Everything. Every moment I'd shared with my father, good and bad. The fishing trips where we sat in comfortable silence, our lines in the water, neither of us needing to speak. The arguments that shook the walls of our house, doors slamming, voices raised, words we couldn't take back. The time he taught me to drive in the parking lot behind the Methodist church and I nearly put the car in a ditch, and instead of yelling he just laughed until tears ran down his face. The Christmas when I was 16 and he gave me his grandfather's watch, the one that had survived 2 world wars, the one I'd pawned 3 years later to buy concert tickets because I was young and stupid and didn't understand what heirlooms meant. I showed them the hospital visits I hadn't made, the phone calls I hadn't returned, the voicemails I'd deleted without listening to because I told myself I was too busy, too important, too justified in my anger. The funeral I'd almost skipped because I told myself I didn't care, when the truth was I cared so much it terrified me. I showed them my shame and my regret, and my desperate, aching wish that I could go back and do it all differently. And I showed them the love underneath it all. The love that had survived neglect and distance and years of stubborn silence. The love that had brought me here, to the threshold of oblivion, ready to sacrifice everything for a man who'd already sacrificed everything for me. The figures absorbed it all. I could feel them processing, analyzing, trying to understand. And for the first time, I sensed something like confusion in their collective consciousness, uncertainty, the beginnings of doubt. "This is contradictory," the chorus said. "You love him, but you also hurt him. You abandoned him. You let him suffer. How can both be true?" Because love isn't simple. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes it looks exactly like hate, but it endures. That's the part you don't understand. It endures even when it shouldn't, even when it makes no sense. I opened my eyes. The figures had drawn closer, their shadowy forms pressing in around me. But it wasn't threatening anymore. It felt almost curious, like children gathering around something they'd never seen before. "Your father believed this would seal the door," the chorus said slowly. "He believed that love would act as static, noise to drown out our signal." Was he right? A long pause, the light shifted, warmed. "We do not know. We have never encountered anything like this." The figures began to move, swirling around me in a slow spiral. "But we are willing to learn. We are willing to wait. The door does not need to open today." I felt something then, a tug from behind me, from the world I'd left. Whitmore's grip on my hand, still holding on from the other side. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we watch, we study, we try to understand what you have shown us." The chorus split into individual voices, each one distinct, each one speaking its own fragment of the answer. "Perhaps in 1,000 years we will comprehend love. Perhaps in 10,000. Perhaps never. But the door will remain closed until we do. That is our promise. That is our debt to you." "And me? What happens to me?" The figures stopped moving. The light around me intensified, golden now, warm as summer. "You return," they said. "You have taught us something valuable, and teachers should not be imprisoned with their students." A sound that might have been laughter or might have been wind. "Go back, Daniel Ashford. Go back and live the life your father wanted for you. Love, lose, connect. And when your time comes, many years from now, perhaps you will visit us again. Perhaps you will have more to teach." The golden light enveloped me. I felt myself being pulled backward, through the door, through the gap, through the cold and the dark and the whispers. The last thing I heard was the chorus, speaking in unison one final time. "Tell the others, tell them we are patient, tell them we are learning, and tell them, thank you, for Harold Ashford, for his son, for the gift of something we never knew we lacked." Then there was light, real light, harsh and artificial, and I was lying on the excavation floor, gasping for breath, Whitmore's hand still clutching mine. My whole body ached like I'd been running for miles. My lungs burned. My eyes watered from the sudden brightness after that strange golden glow. The door was closed, sealed, seamless, the black stone smooth and unmarked, as if no gap had ever existed. The symbols that had writhed and shifted across its surface were still now, frozen in patterns that no longer seemed threatening. Just marks on stone, just history. Brennan lay crumpled nearby, unconscious but breathing. Whatever had been using him had released its grip when the door sealed. I hoped there was still enough of him left to save. And somewhere in the distance I heard Caldwell's voice, shouting for medics, shouting orders, shouting that it was over, shouting that somehow, impossibly, against all odds, we had won. But I wasn't thinking about victory. I was thinking about my father, about the drawing still clutched in my other hand, crumpled but intact, about the debt I could finally begin to repay. 6 months later, I climbed Humphreys Peak alone. It was early September, the aspens just beginning to turn gold along the lower slopes. The trail was quiet. A Tuesday morning, most tourists gone, the summer crowds faded into memory. I carried a small backpack with water, a sandwich, and a metal urn that weighed almost nothing at all. The facility had been decommissioned 3 weeks after the door sealed. Caldwell personally oversaw the excavation being filled with concrete, 60 feet of it, poured in layers, each one reinforced with steel. The door was still down there somewhere, buried and silent, but Caldwell said he slept better knowing there was a building's worth of weight pressing down on it. Whitmore had gone back to Albuquerque, not to the hospital this time, but to a small apartment near Old Town where he was learning how to be human again. We talked on the phone every Sunday. He was teaching himself to cook. He'd adopted a cat named Armstrong, which he admitted was a terrible joke, but couldn't bring himself to change. Brennan survived, though he remembered nothing after the moment he first touched the door. The doctors called it dissociative amnesia. I called it mercy. He'd retired to a cabin in Vermont and sent me postcards sometimes. No message, just his initials. I kept them all. The summit was empty when I reached it. Just me and the wind and the vast sweep of Arizona spread out below. The forests, the deserts, the distant glitter of Flagstaff catching the morning sun. I sat on the same rock where my father had held me 35 years ago and opened the urn. His ashes were grey and fine, like sand from a beach I'd never visited. The funeral home had offered to scatter them for me, but I'd said no. This was something I needed to do myself. Something I owed him. "I met them," I said to the wind. "The things you spent your life hiding. They're not what I expected. Not monsters. Not gods. Just old. Old and lonely and trying to understand something they can't feel." I tilted the urn, let the ashes begin to drift. "They let me go because of you. Because of what you taught me without ever saying a word. They're still out there, Dad. Still watching. But they're not hungry anymore. They're curious. And maybe that's enough. Maybe curiosity is the first step towards something better." The ashes scattered across the peak, caught by the wind, carried toward the horizon. I watched until the last of them disappeared, until there was nothing left but an empty container, and the memory of a man who'd given everything for a world that would never know his name. I stayed on the summit until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. And just before I started back down, I noticed something I'd missed on the way up. Carved into the rock beside the trail, faded by decades of weather but still legible, were two sets of initials, HA and DA, surrounded by a rough heart shape. The kind of thing a father might carve while his son ate a sandwich and looked at the view, too young to notice, too distracted to remember. I traced the letters with my fingertip. The stone was warm from the sun. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." The wind carried my words toward the sky, toward the moon rising pale over the mountains, toward whatever was listening on the other side of a door that would stay closed for a very long time.